Listen to this interview with Jon Moxley on Jericho's show.
Okay.
You're not going to like it as much as that because it is more in depth and more specific.
It is, but it's more the business support and it's a thing. It really shows. It talks about the creative process in general over there and the way he's never been vibing with Vince. I liked Dean Ambrose. I always thought he was good on the mic, and I thought that he was a good performer. But I never really bought into it the way everyone else did. I am a super fan of him now.
After this interview?
I loved this interview. I loved it. And I thought that the things what he did up top is that he gave a lot of respect to WWE and the opportunities that he had. I know where you're going to come from here, too. Like, yeah, but for the next hour and 15 minutes, he shit all over the process. And he did. He was hurt, and he felt like there was he felt he was in a prison for a long time creatively and tried to have conversations about it for a very long time. And I love what he said. You might have missed this because it was at the very end. Jericho asked him about his buddies, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, and how they dealt with him. He's leaving, right? Mm-hmm. And he said he looked at Seth Rollins. He's like, man, it's like Harry and the Hendersons. You know, like after Harry's let out at the end, he's like let out at the end of the woods, and he's with all the rest of the Sasquatches. Yeah. He's like. I'm not meant to be caged up, baby. I'm an animal in the wild. Yeah, and
it's great.
It was a great moment, and he's talked about it. But their conversation was so good, and and I related to a lot of it because it was around he was a little off on the years, but it was around 2001 is when they started the writer's circle, and that's when I got in there, and what it sounds like it is now. It's like making these wrestlers, you're not giving them any freedom anymore, the WWE, and you're just saying, all right, so imagine I said to you, you're doing a Wildberries match, right? And I said, okay, in the post-interview, I want you to say exactly what I wrote. You can't improv.
Oh, no.
You have to say everything that I want you to say. Like, write out your mind, and it's not just beats of like, hey, I want you to set up the suspension and everything.
And one of those words is pooper scooper.
Right, and the pooper scooper thing, right? And I want you, and I give you this angle. You're like, I don't want to do this. I'm making you look like a goofball, but not even a goofball, something that you wouldn't do.
Right.
But you're under contract and you got to do it. And he says, and this is the one thing he said. He's like, I never signed up to be an actor. He's like, I'm not an actor. I'm a wrestler.
Yeah.
And monologues come inside of being a wrestling. He's like, this is scripts.
Sure.
And it was such a fascinating interview. Roxy, you listened to an hour of it. What did you think?
I like him.
Yeah.
I don't agree with a lot of what he said.
Okay.
You did sign up to be an actor. You signed up for the WWE. And I'm not saying you only signed up to be an actor, but honestly, kind of similar to the you and Thad debate just now. When you have a boss, you have a boss.
Right.
And I think that there have been plenty of times that I did not want to do what my boss was asking me to do. But then I can leave or I can do it. And he did say, and I liked this, I'm never going to spite him and not do what's being put in front of me. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, but pushing back on every single storyline. You are not the writer of the show.
But he executed them. He executed all the story. He did do it.
Yes, after trying to change it before Vince would see what the script was, after all that stuff. And again, I think he came across really well. He put himself over very well. He seemed like the really good guy. Two sides to every story. And I know most people are backing him so hard right now, and people love when somebody sticks it to the man.
You saw both sides of it.
I do love that.
Yeah. I do. I think it's ballsy what he did, but at the same time, I don't know. You did sign up to be an actor.
Yeah, fair. It's a good point.
I mean, it's part of the position, right?
Yeah.
Of being a wrestler.
I mean, it is now. I think
you're a performer as well.
Yes,
I think
my biggest problem, I think, in general with it is that the reason I side with him is because and you're right. You sign up for it. That's what it is. And when he came into it, that's the way the process already was. He came in like 2011 or something. So it was already full into the machine at that point. So you're right. But I think that's my biggest issue. Is that his issue is I think that creative process stinks over there.
Totally.
But that's the way it is.
That part I agree with.
Right.
But you signed up for that,
and that's
so
the
you
way
can't
it is.
then say you didn't sign up for that.
Right. But
you can say you don't like it and you want to leave, which is ultimately what he did, which I respect.
But I respect in the fact that he did what he did what was asked of him too. Even if he tried to change some stuff too, because I think that you're right as a performer also to say if you're not comfortable with anything to try to change it, and then if they say no, then you just do it. And he did it. I mean, he took the bumps from Nia Jax. He took he did the things that when they tried to bury him for a little bit. He took those 2-minute losses when he was he didn't. There were a lot of wrestlers in the past that didn't do that kind of stuff and refused to do that kind of stuff.
But then you're not doing your job.
Do they still get paid even when they're not performing on performing nights? Like, do they still get? Because what I look at all of this, right, is that I don't, because they're not full-time employees, because they're not salaried.
Right.
Where does, if they travel and they're traveling on the road, because again, fighting with my family gave me a really cool window into the situation. Didn't make me like wrestling anymore. It gave me a cooler window. Is that because they're 1099 employees and what you've learned from John Oliver and all this kind of stuff, if they travel and they're on the road all this time, but they don't perform that night on Raw, do they still get paid?
So
because
I
if
think
they're
so,
in the building,
because I think the contract itself, it's like
you
X
get
amount,
shows.
Yeah, X amount of appearances and stuff too.
But this is what last night I was talking to my friend Daria, who is Sonya Deville.
Yes.
And she was telling me about.
Is that a wrestler?
yes,
Yes, she's a big wrestler. She's also
Yeah.
She came from the MMA world. She was telling me about how she feels like there is a lot less cattiness or fights amongst the wrestlers because they're all performing so often now. There is a pretty even split, as opposed to in the past where there wasn't as much as an even split. Not everybody was getting as much airtime, especially because they have Raw, SmackDown, NXT, all of the developmental programs and longer shows. There's so much of that you usually are performing, and so you're getting paid more often than I think people would think. And then on top of that,
are you getting paid through injury? That's what I want to know. Right. I mean, that's workers' comp. You can sue for workers' comp.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do think most of them, if you are currently with the WWE on their roster, you do get paid through injury. But what you don't get paid through is if you are injured 15 years after you've worked in the indies for a long time, and then you are trying to get paid through WWE for your injuries, which you might have got wrestling elsewhere.
Sure, no, I mean, or if it's a recurring injury that you got wrestling WWE, there's a very gray area.
Yeah.
Listen, I worked in workers' comp for a long time.
So I would highly suggest you listen to a little bit of it.
Okay.
I think because of the questions that you're asking too, it was very insightful. I think that there's a lot that he talked about, and then obviously him going over AEW, that they feel like kind of as he said, the boys kind of taking care of the boys over there, and that means because like Satin said yesterday when you asked me that question of where I'd rather write, and I said, I think AEW at the moment, because from what I heard, and Satin's like, I don't think they have a writing team. They're letting the wrestlers kind of do their thing, and I think that's for the best.
And that's cool. And if you sign up for AEW and you go into that, and then all of a sudden they're sticking you with scripts, and you're like, whoa, this wasn't the deal.
Right. That's not what he sold me in the room.
That's so different.
Right.
And so I get why that would be more appealing, but I don't know there's nothing else like it, so it's hard to compare. But it's like if you sign up for golfing and to be on Pretty Little Liars,
right? No, it's true. It's the bottom line is he just wasn't happy with his character, and he wasn't happy with the way he was wrten. So what?
And I think he had reason to, because I think he's
dopey.
right. It was dopey as shit.
It was really silly, but that's what he signed up for. And he didn't, there's certain things for people on regular TV shows. So what happened when that whole Katherine Heigl debacle happened years ago, where she shit on the writers and everything too for the way the characters were.
You got to imagine. I mean, you've seen interviews with some of the cast. You got to imagine that a lot of Game of Thrones people did not like the ending.
It looked like Amelia Clark didn't when they did one interview that they had. They asked her if she liked
Nikolai
it.
Castle-Waldo.
Yeah, they didn't seem they liked it. So, but like Roxy said, they did their job.
Yeah,
and they did it.
They also got like $1 million per episode, so I would shut up too.
Yeah.
So did Dean Ambrose at the time. He did do his job ultimately.
And that's what I really respect about Ambrose though, or Moxley in that interview, is what he said was he didn't even, when they offered him his second contract, he didn't even look at it. Because he knew he was out for he knew he was going to be gone, and they said he's like, it could have been $10 million, and I didn't look at it. He goes, and what I loved, did you hear this part of it with his response? Yeah. I loved his response. He's like, what am I going to, even if it was $10 million, what am I going to do with $10 million? He goes, like, I have my car, my house is paid off, my mom's house is paid off.
I met my beautiful wife.
I met my
She's
beautiful
awesome.
wife. He's like, I got everything I need. But he was legit. Like he's like, I don't even talk money with AEW. Like that's rare. Right. That is a rare type of human being. And he's like, and it just worked. He's a creative
Whether you believe
force.
him or not, I mean,
I believe him. I mean, when you hear the interview, I believe him. It doesn't seem like he's doing this for money, because if he was doing it for money, he wasn't holding out for cash.
Yeah.
He was not holding out for cash.
How do you think that this affects his wife?
She works there, right? She's an announcer.
What does she do?
She's an announcer. at
She
WWE.
is Renee Young. She is the announcer.
Raw. Yeah.
Crazy.
She's like the girl.
She is. Yeah, she was like the first female announcer that they ever had. For not in ring announcer, but on the desk.
as long as my